The country's lamb producers got together recently to look at some of the important issues facing their industry. With supply up, prices have come down from the stratospheric levels reached last year. And there's more competition from New Zealand lamb. Chris Clark was at Lambex in the central Victorian city of Bendigo.
Lambex 2012 aimed to bring together everyone in the chain, from producers to processors to retailers. And what everyone wants to know, first and foremost, is how do you sell more lamb?
We're on track to break all records for the first 6 months this year in terms of lamb exports.
If we're going to do some tiering, we have to get customers to make these more important. How the lamb was fed, where it comes from, the breed of the lamb, and any endorsement around the quality assurance of that lamb. They're certainly not in that space at the moment as far as lamb's concerned.
The type of lambs coming forward too, we're also seeing a lot of heavy lambs, a lot of fatty lambs, a lot of lambs that are harder to place into supply chains.
Australian lamb can have an established place on our shelves. So we're still very much in its infancy in trying to have Australian lamb on the retail shelves from the European Union.
In the JBS mobile boning room, MLA's Greg Butler was showing producers about some of the new cuts hitting supermarket shelves.
Consumers, when they eat a chop, for instance, they don't really want to carve around that bone and they find that difficult and messy. It doesn't perform well in restaurants, etc. So the newer, trendier way of doing it is we trim it out to this particular article here, and we take off these nice little lollipop cutlets off that.
There's a big focus on correct carcass size and, critically, the right fat score.
Consumers don't want to buy fat, so we have to trim that off. But we also need the fat to a degree as well for the eating quality. So we've got to get the carcass right so we get the best saleable meat yield out of that carcass. Too much fat costs us money, and we've got to charge a lot more for it.
On the breeding side, genetics was again a big focus. It should drive some important productivity gains.
It's played a big role in transforming the lamb industry, which was kind of on its knees in the late 80s. If that genetics is not improving every year, your industry's going backwards.
The tricky bit is turning the science into a tool that increases profits on the farm.
So we do lots of little trials, basically little progeny tests. You get some rams that you think are good and some rams that you think are average. Get them to generate some lambs, see whether the lambs are different in performance. And we've done that sort of work all over Australia, going back 20 years. So it's just a steady process of reinforcing the message about, yes, we can work out which animals have got the best genes, and yes, you can use it in practice on your farm.
Genetics can drive more than productivity. It has implications for animal welfare.
We want to breed animals that have as little difficulty living in the conditions in which they've got to perform as possible. So they're not going to get worms, they're not going to get fly struck, they're not going to get the diseases that currently cause problems, and they're going to require minimal treatment by humans.
And improving animal welfare can be a marketing opportunity.
It's a sort of intangible benefit that helps people feel good about eating lamb. It's a good product, it's tasty, etc. But people have a good sense about how the animals are grown and where they live and so forth. At the moment, that's probably a minor thing, but it certainly looks like it could become more important in the future.
I asked 30 people a question. What is the most important farm animal in Australia?
There was time for a laugh as well with Trent Blues, a Nebraskan rancher, radio host and self-styled ag activist who likes to counter some of the misinformation about farming.
Nobody said chicken. 2 people said sheep. Nobody said kangaroo. 25 said cow. And 3 said dog. I said, sir, why would the dog be the most important farm animal? And this answer shows the disconnect that we have. He said, well, I figure it's lonely out there in the bush and needs somebody to talk to.
So how did we get to this point where so many people seem to know so little about where their food comes from?
It's actually a celebration of our accomplishments. The fact that people don't need to go out and tend to the land or tend to their animals themselves to get food really creates the opportunity for a disconnect. So the everyday consumer that relies on food being available, and it is readily available. It's really reasonably priced compared to what it takes to produce it yourself. So it's a factor of affluence, because you show me the developing countries in the world where food is not as readily available, they don't have that disconnect. So the strange dichotomy is that we got to this disconnect so vast because we are so good at what we do. It's a celebration of the accomplishments of modern day agriculture.
So how do producers influence public opinion?
I contend that we go to the consumer more regularly and explain to them how we take care of animals, why we take care of animals, and who's involved in taking care of the animals. And then the masses go to Coles and tell them what they want based upon our information instead of the people who want to eliminate milk, meat, and eggs from our choice as healthy living.
You say every producer has to do their bit to educate people, but how do they start doing that?
They all have family members that have left the station, have left the farms, and have moved into Melbourne, Sydney, whatever town it might be. Those conversations are easy for everybody to have. I understand it's really tough for someone to walk into a restaurant and just start talking to people about what they do, and I get a great thrill from that. I learn from that. It teaches me how people perceive what it is that they do, but most farmers are not going to do that. But every farmer has family functions where they can begin this dialogue, and that should be quite simple. And in fact, what you'll learn if you do that is that your own siblings, your own kids, your own aunts and uncles and cousins are just as disconnected as the everyday person that lives and works in all cities around the world.
The lamb on our plates is changing. Retailers are taking cuts that were once nearly worthless and transforming them.
Traditionally, we used to just trim that out for sausages, or often thrown away, or in a lot of cases we used to give it to the dogs when we used to buy our sides of lamb those days.
In the case of the ribs, it was a value of about $1.50 a kilo, and now it's up to...
well, now we're retailing that certainly around the $10 to $14 a kilo, yeah. But I might add, this work goes with it and sensible as well, but what it does, it helps to actually spread the cost across the carcass. Rather than having to charge premium prices, extremely premium prices for these articles, if we can better utilise these secondary primals, keeps those prices lower for the consumer.
The old staple, the big leg roast, is giving way to more innovative approaches.
So this particular one was popular in the Middle East. It was at the food competition there where some chefs made this article, and it's the first rib off the forequarter where we left the two bones together. We normally cut down the middle there and bone it all out. It's actually just left as a whole, and we've got a nice sizable piece of meat there, about 450 grams. So we've just been a little bit more creative as well. There's nothing new about it.
Better cuts from animals bred for purpose. And next week, a close look at the genetics which underpins it.
He's plus 10.4 kilograms for post-weaning weight, whereas this chap here, he's plus 8.4. Still a good ram, but not an exceptional ram.
And so when comes the time to join the ewes and the rams, you're trying to put the very best rams with the very best ewes?
We want the best rams to sire as many lambs as we possibly can and spread those good genetics further and wider.
Breeding better Australian lamb. That's next week on Landline.